From Barnabas Aid New Zealand, Stephanie Johnston. Stephanie, kia ora. Thanks for your time today.
Kia ora. It's good to be home. It was a great trip, but very glad to be back on the New Zealand soil.
Now, of course, this is part of the thing with Barnabas Aid, that you support Christians in some pretty tough communities, and that's certainly what you've been seeing, some of the places that you've been, particularly today, focusing in on the situation for the church in places like Lebanon and Egypt. Now, you travelled to both of these places?
Yep, just returned from Egypt a couple days ago, so it was a week in both places. Yeah.
What is the situation for the church there? I mean, it's not necessarily, it's not downtown Gaza, it's not Tehran, where of course
Yeah.
there's extreme tension there. But I mean, the flow on from this to places like Lebanon and Egypt, still very real tension there, particularly for churches.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I've been thinking a lot about this lately because as an organization, we tend to help the persecuted church, the church that is in the face of hostility 24/7. And places like Lebanon and Egypt, the church is under pressure.
Yeah.
It's not a persecution, but it's this relentless weight of conflict, trauma, displacement, inequality. And so it's a different kind of help and encouragement that we're giving to the Christians there. Whereas in a lot of places we work, we say, the population of Christianity is like 1%. In Lebanon and Egypt, you can be a Christian there. Christians and other religions do get along moderately well.
Yeah.
But you see the tension in how the church is constantly facing this kind of pressure from things outside of their control, really.
Yeah, I mean, Egypt in particular, but also Lebanon, there's been a Christian population, there's been a church there for perhaps
Yeah.
longer than almost anywhere else on the planet. Yes, there's been seasons where they've been more dominant, but as you say, there's relative freedom compared to some of their neighbours. That's not to say that there isn't pressure and there isn't stress and even a level of persecution there.
Yeah, when we were in Lebanon and Beirut particularly, the impact of war was seen everywhere.
Yeah.
Prior to us going to Lebanon, where it's kind of touch and go whether or not we were even going to be able to go because of the conflict that was going on right before we left. But you see these bombed out buildings and, the stories of people who, in October of last year, 1.5 million people were displaced because of conflict.
Wow.
And they were literally given 15 minutes to grab their things and go.
Yeah.
And so when you look at that and you look at the Lebanese people it's just been like one thing after another,
Yeah.
they get the port explosion, you've had war, you've had economic distress. It's just a lot.
Mm.
And I was talking to somebody there and I said, you guys have a lot of trauma to deal with. And she said, for us, trauma starts in the womb. It's literally, it's not just from a memory.
Yeah.
It's in the womb. They have experienced trauma because their mothers experienced trauma. So it's
Yeah.
this generational thing that has been passed down to where it's almost like trauma is just normal for
Mm.
them, the way they talk about it, the way they deal with it. It's sad that how trauma has become so trite,
Yeah.
and they think about it. And so that's part of what we're doing there is helping with trauma counseling, which is so necessary.
I know that this is a part of the world that you have a particular heart for, Stephanie, and in particular with what has happened previously, with the way in which the church in Lebanon has responded to refugees from Syria. Now,
Mm.
since you were last here, of course, the situation in Syria has changed. Some would say for the better. How has that impacted what's happening in Lebanon? Are Syrian refugees able to return home? Is that still a burden that the Lebanese church is carrying? What's happening there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of Syrian Christians and Syrians in general still in Lebanon. Some have gone home, but most have stayed. The problem is that, it's hard for Syrian Christians or Syrians in general to get work. I
Yeah.
mean, they're still not allowed to work in or in Lebanon. So that's another issue. Um, the specific projects that we're helping with currently are mostly displaced peoples.
Yeah.
and some not so much with the Syrian, but a lot of actual Kurdish refugees that we're helping with
Okay.
at the moment.
Yep.
Um, we were able to go to one of the services of the Kurdish refugees, and despite how much they've lost, we were able to worship with them and just experience their joy and worshiping together. It was such an amazing thing to be a part of, to see how people are struggling in these different ways, but yet when it comes to worshiping God, they are just loud, proud, and with gusto.
Yeah.
Um, so that was encouraging to see that. And in a lot of places that we're working, we're still working with refugees, and so the Kurdish refugees are another peoples that we're going to have to step in and be a part of helping.
Yeah. Hey, and in terms of Egypt, of course, the Coptic Church has, often and regularly been the victim of terrorist attacks over the years for,
Mm.
I mean, as you say, in theory, religious freedom, but there are still Islamist groups that have a sphere of influence in Egypt, and of course, sharing a border with Israel and Gaza, certainly continuing to be, a difficult place to be a Christian, and
Mm.
difficult to even go about having churches and doing church.
Yeah, again, it's talking about refugees. We're actually seeing a lot of Sudanese refugees crossing the
Okay.
border into Egypt now as well. So again, facing conflict there, and so in regards to the persecution level that there is there, that's always going to be the case, I think, no
Yeah.
matter what. But it's really cool to see the church in Egypt now quietly serving these Sudanese refugees,
Yeah.
and many of them who have walked 6 days through conflict, danger, and fear. We talked to one lady who she had to flee. Her husband, who's a pastor, stayed behind, and her family left. However, it's not easy for them in Egypt.
Yeah.
As a Sudanese refugee, you again have that issue of, not being able to work. For her specifically, she's told she can't get a job because she's too old. Um, and these Sudanese refugees that are there are, they want to go back home, but they can't,
Yeah.
so it feels like in the Middle East, and especially in Lebanon and Egypt, that we're dealing with a lot of cases where people are having to flee their countries
Mm.
and try to find refuge in different countries. So it's a really tough situation, but the church is stepping up,
Yep.
and that's where we as an organization, we're stepping up to help the church that's stepping up there.
And hey, as we said at the beginning, yes, there are problems in Lebanon and in Egypt, but these are the relatively safe places in the Middle East compared to what is happening in the countries that surround them in that space. Stephanie, for people listening to this at the moment who want to find out more about the refugee program and the work that you're doing in trauma counselling, in particular for people impacted in this space, how do they connect with this? How do they connect in prayer? How do they prayerfully consider financially supporting this work, Stephanie?
We are always, always in need of financial support. There are so many projects that we are supporting there already, but when we were there visiting, there were so many more projects,
Yeah.
so many more things we could be doing. And so I want to just encourage people um, to jump on our website, barnabasaid.org, and think about donating to
Yep.
these projects so that we can do more, because the need is so, so great. And we can't do it without the help of the Christians here in New Zealand. And, one cool thing is that when I would talk to each of these projects and people that we were looking at helping, I would say, there's a church in New Zealand that's praying for you.
Yep.
And I would talk to them about how here we say Kia ora e tufano, which is like hello to our family. And
Yeah.
I said to them, look, you are our family, and you have a family in New Zealand who is walking with you, who is caring for you, who is praying for you. So help me to not be a liar, and let's actually pray for our brothers and sisters in Egypt and Lebanon and the parts of the Middle East, and they're encouraged by that.
Mm.
They're really encouraged by knowing that us in this country at the end of the world is praying.
That is so good. And I'm so glad that there's people in the Middle East that know what Kia ora e te whānau means. That is absolutely brilliant. And hey, I know for you, Stephanie, this isn't just a theory. You've met these people, you've heard their stories, you've looked in their eyes, and hey, these are real people made in the image of God who are hoping to have the freedom to worship God in, not their home country, but the place that they've fled to.
Yeah.
And hey, I'm sure we'll hear some more stories of what God is doing in this space. Thank you so much for what you do. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah. Cheers, Andrew. Thanks.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.